If you're not ready to have your views challenged, don't watch this podcast. This is only made for people who have an open mind and who are on a quest for truth. In this podcast, we talk about the training philosophies of the Soviet Union. We dig deep, uncover some mysteries, and talk about some highly sensitive material. If you're ready to swallow the athletic red pill, then keep watching. Ladies and gentlemen, this is season number 3 of the Kettle Nights podcast, and I have with me Quintin Torres. We both got connected through Instagram because we both follow some of the ideas of Yuri Verkhoshansky, and I am just a novice when it comes to this type of training. For those who don't know, it's all about sport-specific type of training and nervous system training, if we can encapsulate this whole idea into one definition. And Quintin and me, we got connected, and Quintin, that's his life's work actually when it comes to this type of training. And man, I really look forward to this. Before we got started, he said we're going to go deep on this. So man, I'm looking forward. So Quintin, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me. Really excited about this. I actually came across your YouTube video describing, because I've been trying to make videos myself in a documentary style, kind of to help educate people on where sports performance came from, where these studies, where plyometrics came from. It all came from the Soviet Union, and not a lot of people, especially in the West, know about that. So in my process of trying to make a documentary, I came across your YouTube video. And your YouTube video was like, I was like, damn, this guy knows how to do it. Like, the editing was great. You explained the points, your ability to dialogue was really good. I'm like, all right, I gotta talk to this guy, and maybe he's got the platform. You got areas where you're really good at. Maybe I can kind of add some value to that, add some more information, and that could help a lot of athletes in the long run.
I appreciate it. Awesome. Well, and let me just say something about this video. I think it was one of the worst received videos ever. not when it comes to downvotes or comments, or that people, well, some of the comments were a little bit, just the same comments that Dr. Michael Yessis encountered in his work with Yuri Verkhoshansky, and when he was talking about the Soviet Union, how these guys were dominated. And so it was something like, these guys were on steroids and whatever have you. So there was some of the comments, but it seems like it's highly politicized. That's just my impression that I get. And because I was fortunate enough to talk to Dr. Michael Yessis, who worked alongside Dr. Yuri Verkhoshansky, he also mentioned that this seems to be a political topic. So if you could elaborate a little bit on this, the Soviets and the US, is it a politicized topic, yes or no, and elaborate a little bit on it.
Okay, so this is rooted in politics first. This is rooted in political competing ideologies. So that's why it will always carry that emotional spirit in our minds, because that is the source. All right, and this is kind of how human brains work. It's very interesting how everything has to be framed, and emotional context will carry that frame, because essentially that's how we evolved as we pass knowledge from generation to generation. It's been that way since the monkeys. So, where do we start? Okay, we're gonna go way back. We're gonna time travel. So you're gonna come with me on this time travel, and we're gonna go to the end of World War II. Germany falls, gets cut in half. The Berlin Wall happens. You have Soviet ideology on one side. You have capitalistic democratic ideology on the other side, and they almost went to war, the Soviet Union and the Western Allies, immediately after Hitler's regime fell. But both sides did not have enough resources to continue war, so they came to an agreement. You take half of the territory, half of Berlin's assets. We'll take the other half. We're going to help rebuild, and we're going to stick to our ideology because we think people can change. The Soviet Union, I mean, I don't need to describe their ideology. I think the facts speak for itself. They are about turning people into essentially a robotic system for the state. That's kind of what I feel like it boils down to, based on their actions and what history shows. So these two competing ideologies start said Cold War. Time goes on, and the Soviet Union, or let's just say communist ideology, is very desperate on propaganda, because a part of their systems innately go against human natural responses towards life. such as wanting to achieve, wanting to pursue a happiness, wanting to earn your keep and keep what you kill as a form of jobs, income. Capitalism promotes that. Capitalism has this idea that, hey, if you work for it, you earn it, you deserve it. Mm-hmm. Communism, they're like, if you work for it, the state earns it. If you work harder, the state views you as special, but we're not going to pay you more. Mm-hmm. You're just special, and they'll give you a little certificate in the mail. And that basically lets you know that we're not going to come in the middle of the night, knock on your door and arrest your family because you were thinking bad about the system, which happened to a lot of people. They rely on propaganda and fear to control the minds of human beings. Okay, so now that we established that, and this is all fact, you can Google all of this, mm-hmm. and you can also take these sources, not just from American sources from Germany, Russia, Czechoslovakia, all these different China, all these different human accounts of how the communist system worked in real time. Not what it was theorized to do, but how it worked. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So they wanted to create better propaganda to promote that their ideology was better than, say, democratic ideology. So the number one way to flex during a Cold War is to have a technological supremacy race. And that created the space race of the 1950s and 1960s. Mm. So the space race went down. Now we're going into, like, Kennedy was president. Mm-hmm. Joseph Stalin was kind of president. I think he might have died of a heart attack. Nikita Khrushchev quickly took over, who wasn't necessarily a great guy himself, but anyone was better than Stalin, let's be honest. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so they competed and dumped all their resources and tried to make this technological supremacy race happen. Because mm-hmm. essentially, if you can get things, like if you look at the timeline of war, the number one accelerant of dominancy was being able to get weapons in the sky. Through artillery, through World War I, through bombings and rocketry of World War II, and then it came to satellites during the Cold War. And we realized that if they can get things in outer space, what's to stop them from putting a bomb in outer space and blowing up our president? Mm-hmm. Or is it, that was mm-hmm. the big fear. They reached a new altitude of warfare. Mm-hmm. So we combated with our own technological space race. The formation of NASA in Houston, Texas, mm-hmm. and then their formation of the cosmonauts. And we'll kind of blow through that because it's not the main point. So mm-hmm. it kind of went on. We got to the moon. We won. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. We exactly, said, yeah. We put mm-hmm. a flag on the moon. We dominated territory. Yeah. We proved that wanting to do it out of will and wanting to do it out of our own hard work of accomplishment surpassed essentially slave labor, what the communists relied on, essentially trying to do something for the state. We proved we're going to do it for ourselves individually because we mm-hmm. love to do it, not mm-hmm. that we have to do it. Mm-hmm. So the Soviet Union realized that we lost the space race. We need a new vehicle of propaganda. We need something new to prove that our system is still good, because Cold War ain't over. Like, it only just got started. Mm-hmm. So that's when the communist system decided, and this is where it falls under the Soviet Union, and China still does this actually to a degree themselves. This pushes their new vehicle of athletic supremacy. We have better human bodies.
So it went from the space, or the technological battle. It went down to the physical battle. Now, okay, let's prove who has the better, or who's fastest, the strongest, and whatever have you.
Who is genetically superior human, and we kind of get into that whole weird sort of ideological mindset that's really prone into totalitarian governments. Mm-hmm. So that officially started. Okay, so this is where it gets. It's where it gets, I got receipts I can add to this just to make sure that I got my dates correct, because I know there's going to be a lot of people fact checking this. Mm-hmm.
So he came prepared. That's awesome. He came prepared. That's what's up.
Yeah, man. I'm telling you, this is all I do with my life. Mm. Okay. So essentially, once I get to the right page, I'll kind of meander along. Mm. So they decided that they want to compete athletically, and they want to show that they have superior athletes over the West. Mm-hmm. And the Olympic Games was the main stage that they can compete in to prove these things. So here we go. Here's my timelines. Okay. So it started in 1959. or it might be a little sooner than 1959, where basically the Soviet government decided that we need to make better athletes. We've competed in the Olympic Games before. We've done well, but we haven't done that well. The Western United States has one variable that gives them an athletic advantage over most nations. And that was the 1916 to 1918 slave trade. This is a fact. This happened. And that introduced a new genetic variable into the Western lands where we had access to African American genetics, who statistically prove that they have more fast twitch muscle fibers and can usually compete at a higher level for high speed sports. And this is very noticeable in Western sports. NBA, NFL, not so much other sports such as the MLB, but there are definitely outliers. They are dominated by African Americans. Now, this isn't
because of the
subject in my country.
And that
very sensitive subject in my country.
It's crazy. But it's because just for me to understand is right. It's because you have this genetic pool that has a certain tendency to dominate in a specific area of physical capability. So that was introduced into the U.S. in 1916, 18, something around that, right?
Yeah, during the North Atlantic slave trade. That's what went down.
So that gave the West, right, us, so to speak, access to this genetic potential, which could prove valuable to dominate again and say, hey, we are physically superior, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. Just for me to understand it, right?
Yes, and like I said, like this is all you can all scientifically measure these statistics of how African American genetics do have more success in high anaerobic threshold sports. So now that we kind of now that we're putting facts over feelings as we go over this whole thing, is that gave the United States a good, like you said, a good genetic pool to pull from. And the United States is a huge territory. Like it's pretty big compared to most territories, and it's modernized and it's accelerating because the other main superpowers such as the UK, France, parts of Germany, their economies were decimated by World War II, and they accumulated a lot of debt to us. So we were on a good high horse. We were making money hand over fist throughout the 1950s into the 1960s compared to the rest of the world. That's how the United States developed into this huge economic superpower it is today. So the only way for the Soviet Union to compete with these Western athletes, especially the African American athletes from the West, is that they had to take what they had and make it better. So whatever Nikita Khrushchev wanted, Nikita Khrushchev got. Because if you did not obey Soviet principle, ideology, or orders, you would be arrested in the middle of the night, handcuffed, taken to a room, and there is a chance that you could be tortured. Like it happened. It happened a lot.
You're mentioning, wow, and this question was always in the back of my mind. I was like, how can these guys from the Soviet Union, Verkhoshansky and Khrushchev, right? What was his name?
Nikita Khrushchev. He was the second leader.
Exactly. How can these guys come up with these great training principles and tools if they don't have the same incentives like we have, right? Strive for higher income, just the capitalist way of thinking. And you just answered my question. It was like, listen, it's do or die.
Exactly.
And now I get this picture, just for me to rephrase it, and you can confirm this or correct me if I'm wrong. So the Russians, or this part of the world, was forced to adapt and get the best out of their potential because they were competing with a new set of genes, so to speak, that was just genetically highly gifted.
Or it just they had advantages.
Advantages, exactly.
Advantages.
So you are left with a field of athletes where it's like, listen, we don't have these advantages, so we have to come up with a system to get the most out of the potential that we have.
Exactly.
Right? It's all politics, right? The way you're explaining, it's all politics. Oh my God!
It's rooted in politics.
It's rooted in
the
politics
run so deep that people have literally killed each other for these politics. That's how deep this runs in the human, let's say the human spirit, because it all kind of, you see the reactions you get when we talk about this stuff. It's very sensitive material. So it's very fascinating. This is like, I call this the athletic red pill.
Oh man, that's gonna be the name of this podcast, man. I love it, man. Of this episode, man. The athletic red pill, man. That's some heavyweight stuff, man. Keep going, Quintin. This is fascinating, man.
So here we go. Whatever Nikita Khrushchev wanted, Nikita Khrushchev got. We kind of established the consequences of not following Soviet order. So they're like, okay, I want the best scientists, physicists, engineers to build equipment. I want the best kinesiologists, the best statistical analysis we got. And this is before computers. Everything was done on pen and paper at the time. So they brought in mathematicians. They brought in anything that they think could give them an advantage, and they also brought in volunteers. People had to show up. They're like you, and you. You're going to this military base on this day. You have to be there at this time to begin your training program, and we will pay for your room and board. And you can only call your family one day out of the whole year. Like there's a great documentary that really emphasizes this. It's called Red Army. It's about the Soviet Union hockey team and how their lifestyle was throughout the 1970s and 80s. It was you were basically a horse in a stable, to be totally honest. You were not treated like a human, you were treated like a machine. So that means that instead of trying to get people motivated to, like, think about running a kettlebell class, you got to get people in. You got to sell them. You got to figure out what their why is. You got to get them feeling some emotional content to get them motivated to stick with it. You can't just say, like, hey, I need 6 people from this house. All of you guys, you're going to show up, or I'm going to call the police. Right? You can't do that. So,
but if that would even happen, it would, of course, very, like you said, sensitive material, but at least people would move a little bit more, right, than they move today. So if it would be forced, but of course, I mean, it's against, like you said, it's against human nature of wanting to do your God-given right of having your free will, right? Yeah. Yes. My God.
Yeah, it's interesting. So then they established their laboratories, their warehouses, their military bases, and a lot of this stuff was actually held in military bases. High-level professional athletes of the Soviet Union had military status and had military rank and would be judged under military law. So these guys had to do well. And we're not talking about, oh, you get court-martialed, you get discharged from the army. We're talking about you go to a court, you're in a prison cell while the court is happening, and they'll decide whether they're not going to shoot you. Maybe right outside the courthouse. Yeah, that's how crazy. That's how bananas the Soviet Union got. They were just shooting people in the back of the neck right outside the courthouse, not take them to a prison cell, nothing.
You were forced to perform. You were forced to perform. You bring your A game all day, every day, or else, right? God.
And then that gets passed into culture, and now that becomes the new norm. You don't question anything. You don't say anything. Exactly. You just do. Yeah. So once they established all these things, the United States didn't quite have that same mentality. You had to motivate people, and the industry only grows if money grows into it. If there's no money, there's no industry.
Nobody's interested. Yeah, it's a completely different system. My God. Yeah, I mean, now I do understand the repercussions of this. If you have a state, the state behind a particular system, it doesn't care whether people are interested or not. Right. If the state dictates that you're supposed to be interested and to give your A game, you have to. While in our part of the world, it's like, hey, you don't like it, leave it be. There's no money in it, so there's no advancement, right?
Exactly. And there's no evolution of it. So what happened is, now that the Soviet Union established their way of doing it, The United States went a separate way. This is actually a passage I have to read because this is very important. This is very, very important. This is the turning point that changed everything. All right, I'll try to read this as best I can. I'm not the best, not the best reader.
Keep going. Keep going.
Okay. So this is out of page 5, out of Super Training by Dr. Yuri Fonchahowski. Great book. This is the source. It's the source of the athletic red pill. So the increasing ideology, isolation of nations, and well-protected prestige of sporting success meant that research in all fields, including sport, took different directions. During the years of both world wars, Russia and Europe still continued to promote their virtuous physical strength and power, whereas research in the West rapidly veered in the direction of cardiovascular fitness, assuming great impotence with the running for health and the aerobics craze. Associated closely with the Swedish endurance exercises research and popular fitness books such as Kenneth Cooper's Aerobics. This is where the Cooper's test comes from. You may have heard of this before. It's a standard amongst Western philosophy of training for cardio, the Cooper's test. This resulted in vigorous promotion of cardiovascular doctrine, the paradigm which maintained that cardiac and general health depends on predominantly on prolonged endurance or aerobic exercises. At the time, proponents of this doctrine fairly vigorously degenerated the health benefits of strength. Oh, we gotta switch over. Training. For example, Cooper, 1968, page 25, looks up, stated, if it's muscular or body beauty you're seeking, you'll get it from weightlifting or calisthenics, but not much more. If it's overall health of your body you're interested in, isometrics won't do it for you. Neither will isotonics or anaerobics. Aerobic exercise is the only way that will. So
Cooper said this.
Yeah, Cooper said this, and he's not wrong. This is fact. This has been proven time and time again. So basically what they're saying is we got to think about what evolves industries. There's no money in sports in the 1950s. There's no money in the 1960s, but there is money in promoting healthy heart aerobic training to keeping your citizens healthy. This was also a time when, because now we're starting to realize, I don't know if you guys ever had the fat-free era in your history.
Most definitely.
Yeah,
of course. Fat's the
now
devil.
We're all realizing that cardiovascular disease, hypotension, high heart disease is more of an origin response of high grain carbohydrate diets, not fattening diets. When you mix the two together, and this is the whole nother subject, when you mix the two, then you create, I'm sure you realize, if you eat a lot of carbs and you eat a lot of fats,
highly palatable.
Your body is going to burn the carbs and it's going to store the fat, creating hypotension, etc. So the United States was medically incentivized because we just lost a huge population of men. We lost a huge population of men that were destroyed during World War II. Not only destroyed, were damaged. They couldn't join the workforce quite as effectively. There were no therapists in 1949 for veterans. Like, get out of here. That science didn't even occur yet. So a lot of the times you just drank, or you just ate, or you just went to work, and you just tried to live your life as best you could. And a lot of guys really struggled with that. So the United States was more incentivized to keep its general population healthy, especially since we were a huge influx of grain resource for most of the world at the time, because that's when we really got our agricultural industry established. Like, we got really good at producing grain in the United States, and people needed grain. Like, England needed grain, France needed grain, Germany, all these areas that were decimated by the war, they needed food production. So grain food production increased in the United States popularity, so did heart disease. So we're like, okay, aerobics help with heart disease. We're going to push that. And not only that, there's money in health insurance. There's money in the medical field. Follow the money. That's what grew that philosophy.
Jane Fonda, right? I mean, she would. That's Jane Fonda in a nutshell. Why she was so successful. But one thing before you move on, Quintin, Quintin, I'm sorry. Maybe I misunderstood something. Cooper said that there's no health in anaerobics, right? Or did I
No, when it comes to keeping your overall vitality, like so you need to have aerobic in your life.
Most definitely.
We have a genetic disposition to be aerobic animals. It's
Yeah.
a part of our hunter-gatherer mentality.
Exactly.
So if you're just sprinting and you're doing no aerobic work, there's a chance that it could have negative consequences on your cardio and your heart.
Most definitely. It just sounded to me like, hey, no anaerobics, right? Hey, no strength training is not beneficial for your health. That's how I translated it to a certain extent. Of course, aerobics are incredibly important. I just made a video about this topic where I mentioned that we are endurance or power endurance beings. We are the turtles of the animal kingdoms, and the outliers, the bears and the big guys, the folks who lift heavy weights, these are outliers. Normally we're supposed to walk a lot, run and walk distances, carry stuff, but we're not made to lift big or to go heavy in a sense like this, right, to a certain extent. So I just misunderstood what Cooper was saying. That's why I was like, right? But I get it, most definitely.
You got to remember, this was statements he was making back in before computers. Yeah. So no one knew what fitness was yet.
Yeah, it's crazy, man.
So
it evolved so quickly. Evolved so quickly. It's crazy.
So this is where these two philosophies split, and they both had incentivism to split. They had one had monetary gain to split off in this area, and with the introduction of bodybuilding, aesthetic muscle development, that got really popular in Western culture because you can sell that. You can sell that through movies, entertainment, workout magazines, etc., food products, supplementation. That pushes money into the industry, and then that becomes the new way. Before the Soviet Union fell, there was not a lot of money in athletics. Like there was guys who were working in the ABA and NBA during the 1970s who were working full-time jobs, coming in playing professional basketball.
This is unbelievable today, and it's such a great, not only a great history lesson, but also a great economic lesson to where the money flows, this is where development goes into. This is what grows the particular field where the money flows to. Man, that's fascinating.
It makes total sense.
Yeah, it makes
totally
sense.
Logical.
It makes.
But the thing is, it was so long ago, we don't remember. We don't remember it. It's like, have you ever heard of the burning of the Library of Alexandria? Sometimes information gets lost to humans and we don't remember. This has been reoccurring time and time again. That's why they called it the Dark Ages. We forgot how to do things and we had to reset it. This is probably like our third reset throughout the human race.
And that's why history repeats itself. It's because we don't listen, we don't know, and we don't go back into the history books, look what happened beforehand, draw from the lessons. I mean, these couple of years past were just a great example of how we forget how to do things. And then we human beings, it's what everybody does when we don't understand something. We go into panic mode instead of, but that's another topic.
Or we double down with what makes us feel safe. We 100%. Double down in our own cave to 100%. Fight off bears.
100%, man.
So, okay, so let's get back. I'm trying to get my brain back into. Okay, so now that we established why the two industries started to develop differently, now we can start to dive in what happened to those two industries as they went their separate ways. I kind of covered why the Western way of strength training, weightlifting, fitness, all that, why that started to evolve and grow and expand, because monetary development was happening in those, not necessarily in sports. That didn't come till after the Soviet Union fell. So in the Soviet Union, they had unlimited resources, unlimited bodies, unlimited scientists, unlimited working hours to come up with how do you make human beings faster, jump higher, live longer. You know, they didn't need money to incentivize. There was their own personal survival mechanism that was incentivizing them. And I would say the unsung heroes of the Soviet Union, the people who actually helped contribute to the collapse of the Soviet Union and the collapse of communism for, in my opinion, the betterment of all mankind, were scientists. Because the Soviet Union could not hide scientific truth because it was dependent on it. So it was a lot of scientific truth wrapped in a cloud of lies and propaganda. That's
Wow.
why that's why Westerners don't want to acknowledge the effectiveness of some of their scientific breakthroughs. I mean, because they had incredible scientific breakthroughs. Like it was absolutely like they created like slow motion cameras, plyometrics, satellites,
Man,
um,
I
fission reactors, nuclear technology.
I was reading the book from Dr. Michael Yessis, the Secrets of Russian Sports and Fitness, where he mentioned that back in those days they were, like you said, high speed cameras, lifting or having the runner lifted on straps so that it's just fascinating technology in a day and age where we were like, wow, a super slow motion camera costs probably, I don't know, tens of thousands of dollars. Right now you have a GoPro or an iPhone and that's enough. But back then they were developing these systems. And isn't it the problem that we human beings lack discernment? We cannot discern between what is propaganda and what is true scientific knowledge.
Right. A part of that is because to acknowledge scientific truth, you need to admit that you're usually wrong. And that's not a good feeling because our brains are limited. Like we only have like 6 sensory organs. Like how many possible elements are in the cosmos? Kind of think about that idea. We can only detect a few with our eyes, ears, nose, and mouth. Like people need to realize we're special, but we're also very limited little animals. So you got to rely on these systems and tools to help extrapolate the truth. And it's far more complicated than our linear brain patterns are designed to accept. So you have to take your own ego out of the way and admit that this is so much bigger than us. It's a very difficult thing for human beings to do because we are natural prey animals first. We weren't predators first, we were prey first. So we're always going to prevent some sort of harm before we open ourselves up and be vulnerable in any sort of way. It's how the natural mechanism works. And you can kind of see that in the dating market when you talk to women, she's going to be a little defensive at first. You know, you got to kind of charm and, talk and be the cool guy. And that kind of helps break down barriers. This is how our psychology is programmed. So as this thing was developing, we established all this technology that the Soviet Union was doing. They were creating all sorts of weird things. Like most of the workout equipment you see look at the kettlebell. The kettlebell came from Eastern Bloc training methods. They tried everything. They also had engineers and physicists inventing new equipment like weekly to try to figure out if this produced results. So Dr. Yuri started to establish a lot of these scientific breakthroughs back in 1959 when he wrote his first published paper. And now to get something published, let's talk about this because, man, this is such a big topic. There's so many different areas you got to kind of cover to encase this for everyone. But this is the number one barrier I run into when I try to convince people of nervous system training and these Soviet Union principles. So like, well, I don't see any studies in the universities in the West that prove any of this stuff. I'm like, you're right, you don't. Why though? Why? Here's a story for you. I used to train, I'll keep things nameless just for the privacy of the podcast out of respect. I used to train a physical therapist near me, and she went to University of Michigan. University of Michigan is a very prestigious university in the United States. Like the guy who started Google, maybe not, I don't know. There's been a lot of really high level achievers come from University of Michigan. And like my sister went to University of Michigan. Like they are like in Michigan, like U of M is the place. This is where the people who change the world come from, right? Mm-hmm. She was a part of the first university study to determine whether off-ice training helped on-ice performance in hockey, right? Mm-hmm. How long has hockey been around?
You tell me.
Like 80 years? Hockey's been around forever. And it wasn't until 2007 is when the University of Michigan was able to afford enough money to conduct this study. Studies cost money.
I get what you said. The funding, man.
The funding. It's all in the money because capitalism lives and dies on money. This is why the studies are so slow right now. Because You got to pay for the volunteers. You got to pay the athletes. Some athletes might get worse. And these are your U of M athletes. You want them getting worse for a scientific study, and you got to have someone publish it. All these people require salaries. Like, it's expensive to conduct a study. So you got to go dial for dollars. You got to call investors. You got to do all this stuff just to try to get people to help the human race.
Because what you're saying, the objective of the study can reach such valuable results for hockey players, ice skaters, whatever have you, folks who are on the ice. And 80 years later, we have enough money to fund this idea, which can really change or at least advance the idea of training in that particular field. So I get most definitely where you're coming from. But of course, if you have a system where it's not about the money, it's about advancing the ideas, the philosophy, and the propaganda of the state, and to keep this idea of dominance, right? Or to elevate the idea of dominance, that we are the specimen who are able to dominate the field. Of course you'll get the funding. Of course you'll get the scientists. Of course you'll get the volunteers. Because the state said so. But in our system, I get what you're saying, man.
Yeah, man. Dude,
but these are mental gymnastics coupled with an understanding of the history books that not many people do. It's like, yeah, why is there no research on kettlebells? Yeah, because it's fringe. There's no money in it. And I mean, one thing is, it's one thing to fund the study. It's another thing to have it published and get some results out of it, right? I mean, let's say like you have a huge study and then they have an objective and then they found out no, right? So no, it doesn't happen what we wanted to achieve. It's not something that, you want to pay a lot of money to, or
it could be all for nothing.
It could be all for nothing, exactly. Yeah. My God, man.
It's
so many great points.
It's all making sense now.
It's making sense, yeah.
You're feeling it in your brain.
That red pill, brother, man.
Dude, I'm telling you, man. It's like, because a lot of people, in all fairness, it's too hard to figure all this out. Like, I've been working on this forever. Like, it's forever. Like, it's the only way I eat is through this training method, understanding how it got here. Because I was an athlete myself. I did MMA. You need results for MMA, because if you don't, you get your ass kicked. You could basically walk out of there with the equivalent damage of a car accident. So you have to get better. You need results. And when I started utilizing this training system, I could not believe how much better of a fighter I was becoming within weeks, days. It changed everything for me, but we'll get there. This is so much to unpack. We haven't even gotten to Marv Marinovich yet.
Yeah, I mean, it's probably going to take a couple of podcasts.
It might.
It might, but it's exactly what I was looking for, because I have so many questions that I had coming into this podcast, or questions that I didn't even know I had once we started the conversation now makes sense, because it's just plain, basic one-on-one understanding, right? This is the demand. This is what drives the service. This is what drives the idea. Funding goes. It's just putting one-on-one together, right? To a certain extent. Yeah, man. But keep going.
We're kind of going through history right now.
Yeah. So, we have to in order to understand it. Makes total sense. Yeah.
And we understand where we have arrived. Mm-hmm. That's how I always like to frame it, because we arrived here right now. So, so we established that they were making huge breakthroughs. I mean, they were just, Verschansky was understanding that something called the shock method, so that when your foot makes contact with the floor, your muscles will flex really fast and then contract. It's called a linear stretch shortening cycle, and that puts kinetic energy into the floor, back into your body, propelling you forward as you sprint, jump, whatever, etc. So they established all these ideas, and everything you see when it comes to plyometrics, medicine ball throws, balance training, the glute ham device, working the posterior chain, all that came from Russia. That was all Russian science that came from that. No one knows that. because it's under the language form of plyometrics in English, but we created that. Dr. Yessis created that term just off the top of his head because he didn't know what to call shock method. And plyometrics sells better than shock method.
It sounds great. You know, I had this. I'm just memorizing the conversation that I had with Dr. Michael Yessis, and the first question that I asked him when we got started. I mean, he's 92 years old now, and he took the time to have a Zoom podcast with me. So after some we got started, then it turned off. So it was, so his daughter was helping out, but I'm digressing. It was awesome. So the first question that I'm asking this man was like, Dr. Michael Yessis, can you explain what does plyometrics even mean? And he says, you know what? I don't know. And I was like, what? And I think he mentioned that it was kind of a misnomer dated back to an American athlete who was talking about, I can't remember the name. I think it was a sprinter. And it kind of...
It was a sprinter at the games, and they were noticing that the Russians were doing what you see every sprinter do now as a standard, but no one knows where it came from. Doing high knees, doing bounding jumps, you know, shaking their legs. They're getting the gamma neurons activated so their muscles will go into stretch faster. And they're like, oh, that's kind of interesting. I've never seen high knees, or, you know, when they do these like skip movements, or they do like these jumps and their legs come up, like they do a couple bounds before the race starts. So that's when they first started to see this idea, and they monkey see, monkey do, when we started copying. So a lot of what you see in sports and fitness is just copy pasted methods from the Soviet Union that we've repackaged and resold because we're capitalists. We need to sell it. People aren't just going to want it. They got to feel good about it first.
And we cannot give credit to a system that was public enemy number one back in the days.
Exactly.
Right. So,
it's really, in my opinion, it's very inhumane to not give credit to it, because a lot of people die for our benefit. Let's keep it a stack. A lot of human beings suffered horribly just so we could have good fitness classes. You know, if you really want to be honest of the source of this stuff. So this is why I kind of take a personal responsibility to not lose this knowledge and to try to spread it. Because I imagine, like, just kind of imagine, like, these people weren't allowed a legacy. A lot of them weren't even allowed a funeral or a headstone. So this is one way you can kind of honor some of those people who worked their ass off, sacrificed everything, and still failed, and were put in prison, and were killed, tortured, murdered, etc. You know, and they have no memory, no identity, no face. They're lost in history. And just so we could have a good fitness class. Like, this is how, like, this is, but this is honest. This is like the truth. This is the truth of how we got our information. So I think it's very important that we do respect the Soviet history, because at the end of the day, these weren't robots. These were people. These were people who felt just like we did. Not all of them wanted to be drones, but they had to be drones, you know? So, sorry, that was like a little personal thing that I kind of wanted to mention. For when people want to criticize a lot of this information, just keep in mind, this was built on the blood of hardworking human beings who are good people.
Yeah, I feel like 100%.
Yeah. So as things sort of developed, that's when we saw the rise of the red steamroller, the Red Army push through the Olympics. They were starting to dominate. And to be totally fair, there were substance abuse in the Soviet training.
Dr. Michael Yessis mentions this as well.
Abuse with American athletes too. Like, there were steroids on both sides. You know, and to be told, and I don't know, I mean, that's something we can't exactly measure. We don't exactly know who is taking more juice than the other person. But coming from experience, working with a lot of athletes for like the past 8 years, steroids or no steroids, you can take performance enhancing drugs and not get better at your sport if you don't train properly. Like, I've had guys that I've worked with who I knew weren't juicing, doing my training method, and we beat guys who were on steroids. So it's not everything. It's a big part. It's definitely a big weird part of sports right now. But it's not everything. You need proper training. That is going to make the overall difference in the long run.
I think one thing that I remember from Dr. Michael Yessis' book, because he was talking about, in an addendum to the book of Russian Sports and Fitness, he was talking about the substance abuse. And he said that as far as he recalls it, the Russians used it in initial stages. And then I think they realized pretty soon the detrimental effects on the health of the athletes. So they kind of stepped away to a certain extent. But of course, I mean, I take this with a grain of salt. But he definitely mentions that both sides were on. And so, but that does not, we cannot say just because somebody's on steroids, or even if you have both sides who are on steroids, that one side is beating the other based upon supreme or superior training philosophies. So, right? Mm-hmm.
Physics is physics. Then the
Exactly.
body runs on laws of physics.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's not all chemistry. It's physics. It's a combination of the two working properly.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
So as these started to develop, things were getting proved scientifically by Russia over and over again. And go back. Let me switch my source material. So then we have like 1959. And all this stuff is out on the internet. So if people want to fact check this and collect resources, like just look it up. It's there. And these are all published papers under the Soviet Union. These are all things that they've gotten measurable results with. And this is where this is like the published papers that are so expensive to make in the United States. They were just cranking them out. And it takes every like 3 to 4 years for a new published paper to see if they get results. So 1959, New Methodology of Strength Preparation for Jumpers by Dr. Yuri. 1961, Triple Jump, the book by Moscow. 1964, Novelty of Strength Preparation for Jumpers. 1966, Dynamic Structure of Complex Motor Actions, Theory of Practice Physical Culture. Like it goes on in 1967, Are Depth Jumps Useful by the Soviet Union. 1968, Shock Method and Development Explosive Strength Training under Physical Culture. It goes from 1979, 1986, like all this scientific doctrine, all this stuff. And here's the weird thing. U of M, if they wanted to, they didn't even have to conduct their study. They could have just used this source material. Because science is science. Whether it's in Russian, whether it's in English, like science is science. If it's measurable and it's been proven, it's a thing. But why go against a competing ideology? That just makes the university look bad. So rooted in politics still.
Exactly. And I have encountered this many times. It's painful to engage with somebody, this huge mountain of evidence, where people are just blatantly disregarding it based upon their political views. I mean, this just is beyond me, right? But still, you have a huge mountain of evidence.
Yeah.
And we just completely push it to the side because our feelings get hurt.
Exactly.
In parentheses.
Exactly.
Right?
And to be totally fair, it's hard to convince one ideological system that another ideological system works. Because I don't know how it is over in Europe right now, but in the West, in the United States, the universities have become very ideological in the past 3 decades.
Yeah, we see that. And you know what's funny is everything that happens in the U.S. always gets trickled down in a reduced fashion in Europe. It's like
it bleeds into it.
Yeah, it bleeds into it, even though we don't have no common grounds. It's like, hey, something happens in the United States. You see it happen in Europe, or there is some repercussions in Europe as well. And sometimes you ask yourself, yeah, I understand the pain, or I understand what's going on over there, but we have a completely different history. Why are we engaging into the same, or why are we tackling the same ideas? Why are we even accepting these ideas as true? Why are we, you get what I'm saying? It trickles down because we're the U.S. is the world's leading superpower. So that's
you want to know why?
Tell me.
Because it makes money. People buy American products. People buy U.S. philosophy. countries buy into it. Yeah. They'll buy into it because our economies are all chained together through NATO right now.
Yeah.
So the spreading of information, culture, monetary.
But you know what? You know what's funny, and this is where you see this in the kettlebell world. You see this where two people or three people come together. We disagree, right? It happens. Okay. But where most people have a hard time wrapping their head around the idea that two people or two experts on the same level can disagree and still be friends and still everybody can be right in their own right. Mm-hmm. That's just such a hard fact for people to understand. It's like, no, you disagree, so that means you are against them. No. I just see it differently. I have a different perspective, right? It's such a hard thing for humans to grasp.
And it's also because we really discourage scientific truth philosophy. It's more encouraged now than ever before if you look at the scale of the human race. Mm-hmm. But generally speaking, like, let's say if like I have a disagreement with another sport performance trainer, I always tell them, like, okay, what are the facts? Mm-hmm. I could be wrong. Like, because at the end of the day, it's not about how I feel, it's about who this could help.
Yeah, I always say, I call it the quest for truth.
Yeah.
I'm just on a quest for truth and I don't care. And that's sometimes that I even ask myself where people start challenging the kettlebell, right? Or sometimes people think that they can attack what I do if they find weakness in the tool that is the kettlebell. And then the funny thing, it always happens, the same thing happens. I'm like, yeah, you're right. The kettlebell is not made for this.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're right. Doesn't discredit it, but it's not good at this. It's not good at looking like a body. You want to look like a bodybuilder? The kettlebell's not the perfect tool for it. Yeah, you're right, most definitely. Yeah. So it's I think I don't know. It's wired into our human brains, right? I've read a book about tribalism, where we hurdle together. Where it's like, hey, it's always that you against me, the in group versus the out group, right? Mm-hmm. So as soon as disagreement is bound to happen, the in group out group thinking gets kicked in, and I think depending on how you confront this, you can either tame the tribalist mindset of the human being of humans, or engage it even further.
Yeah, it's at the end of the day, we're still animals with fancy haircuts.
Yes.
We don't appear like animals because we can groom and take care of and clothe our bodies, but this has been going on for millions of years, like this, where we arrive now, and all of our feelings and our impulses, they were there for a reason when we had to compete against other dangerous predators, humans, etc. So it's just is what it is. Mm-hmm. It slowly changes over time. Doing things like this is a part of the overall progression, and always keep in mind that the one thing that does save lives is scientific truth. Scientific truth does keep more humans alive than people being killed or dying somehow. Mm. So at the end of the day, what do you want to do with your life? Do you want to protect your feelings, or do you want to add another brick to the ever climbing wall of human progression before you die? That's how I kind of look at it.
Wow.
Because at the end of the day, this isn't about. This is about who this could help. This is about all of us. This is about, maybe this could help a kid get into college and change the future of his legacy and his family forever. Who knows? Like that's really what's important, not me being right or Verchowski or the universities. That's really not what's important, because all that's artificial. All that's made up in our heads. Like, money is not real. Our brains and our bodies are real. We just make it real because we need a system to keep us safe and working. Mm-hmm. So that's a little more philosophical.
Yeah. But man, we could go on for hours about this, man. Oh, yeah. Most definitely. But keep going, man. So fascinating.
Okay, so now that we established that the Soviet Union was developing all these training methods that we see today, and you can look up all the black and white footage on YouTube, and you put a lot of that stuff in your own videos. Mm-hmm. This is all video evidence documentation. You can look up at all of this. And so then we'll go into Dr. Yessis. Dr. Yessis, I don't remember exactly how it happened, is there a date on this? So basically, Dr. Yessis was allowed, he was a PhD at University of Southern California, and he was allowed to go to the Soviet Union to help him study. And I think he spoke Russian. There was some sort of policy amongst the two nations to allow this to happen. I don't exactly know the details of this.
I think he's all, I'm paraphrasing, and I'm not 100% clear on this, but I think he's also of Russian descent. So I think that's one of the reasons why he was speaking Russian and why. But I'm not clear on this. I think I read it somewhere in the book, but read so much of his material that maybe sometimes I get things confused. But yeah.
So so Dr. Yessis is really the unsung hero of sports performance in the United States. He really is. He's the one that slowly but surely pulled it all in and brought he created like a window of source information for it to get into the United States. And, you know, talk about someone who's stuck to scientific truth and has got nothing but criticism and ridicule by his own fellow scientists. Dr. Yessis does not get enough credit. Like, he is the reason he's contributed to more professional athletes becoming professional athletes or college athletes than anyone else in the United States. I'm going to say it right now. Man. Like, he literally, there would be no great NFL, no great NHL. None of that would exist without his work and his risk of doing what he did. And it's, you know, shout out to Dr. Yessis.
Yes, such a huge legacy that you leave behind. And but still, he said, I remember what he said in the podcast, because I was trying to make sense. You know, when I had the conversation with him, I was trying to make sense of this. I was reading Verkhoshansky's books, and it was blowing my mind. I was like, I thought everything's supposed to be easy, right? Just do some deadlifts, and it'll be better. But here we have this dude coming up with SPP exercises and crazy stuff, and 3 sets of 5 and 2 sets of 10, and I was like, how? That's crazy, right? But I got into it, and in the conversation with Dr. Yessis, I was like, how is this? Why is this dichotomy? Why does this exist? Why are we not approaching this mountain of evidence that clearly seemed to work? Why are we disregarding it? And he was like, you know, I've been fighting this my whole life, he said.
His whole life, man. This has been the legacy to this, honestly, it's so interesting. It's so, like, that's one thing I do say. I was like, man, I do actually have a really cool thing that I'm working on in life right now. It is a very cool thing. Like, one day it'll be a documentary, one day. So as kind of sports evolved, right? We got, like, Russia got better. We kept trying to compete. We were able to compete because we did have the genetic pool of African-American athletes. We also had a much larger population of healthier people. So healthier human beings have more opportunity to use their bodies to compete. That was also a big factor because we had a good medical system. We had a lot of food. We were able to create a situation where perhaps people in Africa who didn't quite have the resources, technology to sustain their bodies, they couldn't quite pull off the athletic feats that, say, a modern African-American person could, or even just a modern Caucasian person. Because nutrition, good health care, access to equipment and facility and space, like, that goes a long way.
It's such a crucial condition. I didn't think of this. Dr. Yessis lays it out in his book, but the way you say it now, a much bigger, but also a much more healthier population equals the fact that we probably have better athletes. Such a big, crucial condition, or more potential, right?
More potential, more able bodies, more people who could withstand the natural selection process of sports. And now you got more kids who can sign up, more kids, more money. It's starting to grow.
Oh, God.
Sports is starting to grow in the United States now.
Makes so much sense, man.
It makes total sense. If you kind of think about it, like,
that's why I enjoy it so much, because it's 1 and 1 and 1 and 1, right? You just combine it. You just add the numbers. Keep going.
So then, and we also prioritize, honestly, in the beginning, early American athletics did not prioritize high anaerobic sports. We prioritize lower anaerobic sports such as baseball. You know, baseball, you don't have to be always the fastest, the strongest. You can also use skill, technique. Look at, like, Babe Ruth. He was not by any stretch of the imagination like a top tier athlete. Like, the guy was drunk sometimes when he played. Like, but he had great skill. He had great technical work, you know, and a sport like baseball, that gives more advantages to all sorts of people. So baseball really got popular in the United States first, and that's what really started the breakthrough of professional athletics in United States culture. So then we're gonna fast forward a little bit into the late 1970s, early 1980s. Now we're kind of going into the height of Russian hockey, because that was probably their biggest flagship for athletic supremacy. Now, the Russians, you should watch this documentary. Anyone who's also watching this podcast, just search Red Army on YouTube on the Soviet Union hockey team. It goes into great detail. It's a phenomenal documentary on how they lived, how they trained, how their culture was, how their ideology looked at hockey. Like, they would handpick kids at such a small, they would have tryouts of 1,000 kids, like on a hockey rink, and people would be waiting in line for hours upon hours just to demonstrate their 5-year-old hockey skills so he can be selected by the state. Like, the infrastructure of their sports, you could never pull that off in the United States. You have to pay big money to pull off something like that, you know? So it was, their production line was just on overdrive, you know, and our production line was a lot slower to develop. So their training methods got crazier. They really proved things down. Their system, by the time the 1980s came around, got really tight. But if you look at history, it wasn't quite able to grow in every single sport because, one, they didn't have professional leagues, so that there was less interest, less diversity of the sport. And when you have success at certain things, the Soviet Union, they didn't have a lot of options because their government was essentially kind of crumbling from the inside out, especially after the Chernobyl nuclear incident happened. That was the final straw that broke the camel's back on the communist government system that completely broke it. So they had hockey, they had gymnastics. I think Olympic lifting, and wrestling. They were really good at their wrestling. They had great wrestlers. Those were like their main staple programs. And all the Soviet people wanted to get into those programs because then they would actually be allowed a nicer house, a little bit more income. You know, instead of 2 loaves of bread a week, they were allowed 4 loaves of bread. Like, that was, you know,
it's the incentive to live, man. It's just the incentive to survive drives you into overdrive, whatever it takes. Okay, my kid has to compete so that we get 4 loaves of bread. Of course, they're all standing in line. And now that you're mentioning weightlifting, something crossed my mind that I just checked out recently. This guy, I can't remember his name. He's Georgian, and he's clean and jerking like insane amounts of weight, and he's Georgian. So I checked out his coach, dials back into the Soviet Union. So that's why this guy is so incredibly great at weightlifting, is because I am sure his coach is using these techniques back in the day of the Soviet Union. Just as a small side note, Talazhetov, something like this. Yeah, just can't remember.
You can trace this legacy back in so many different little channels of sports right now. Like, it's really fascinating. So as the Russian steamroll was going down, they were claiming Olympic gold like game after game. And in all fairness, those hockey players train their asses off. Those boxers, those wrestlers, the work ethic of those Russian people is uncomparable, in my opinion. Out of everything that I've seen, as far as and there's been hardworking humans in all parts of the world, but this system literally drove people to insane levels. Like, they were talking about they would piss blood after conditioning. If their heart rate wasn't at 220, that they were punished. Like, 220? Like, I've never got my heart rate to 220.
No. Sometimes my heart rate is like 180. I'm like, man, that's high. That's high. I'm oh my God. It's crazy.
Like, the workouts they would do, and they had a specific ideology. They're like, victory through intense, vigorous training or death. Dude, they were crazy, but they were successful. And another reason why they're so successful is because when you're in a system that emphasizes everyone is connected, but like in this this drone-like robotic sort of mentality where no one's an individual, everyone is a piece of a much bigger puzzle, which is the state. That creates some sort of weird dynamic amongst players, able to understand each other, read plays, understand each other's habits, and the ability to make plays and to work things out on the ice. No one could compete with it. They were hitting weird levels of psychological performance amongst each other. It was a very strange, it's never been duplicated. They were literally, without speaking words, creating plays, adapting to different hockey strategies, and winning, you know, all just because of how the system kind of forced them all to connect.
Wow. So it's not a question of whether the team spirit exists or not. Where you have sometimes, you have in soccer, for example, is big in Europe, and then you have teams who buy in the biggest players, and they do bad, the worst, because you have all these alphas in one group, and it doesn't work, right? Because hey, I'm the boss. But in that system of these hockey players, they're like, hey, listen, we're united. The team spirit exists because we are from the Soviet Union, and then it's different. You can't, we're brothers, right? I see it.
Yeah, it's like a hive mind.
A hive mind. Oh, the perfect description, man.
Yeah.
Wow.
So, let's get back. Sorry,
we're always
an encyclopedia of information I've been filing away for years. Okay, so let's get towards Marv Marinovich, because I'm sure I don't know how much time we have left, but I want to at least
keep going.
Maybe a cliffhanger for the viewers.
Yeah, keep going.
So now we're going to go back. We're going to go back in time a little bit, and we're going to go into the 1960s again in the United States. There is a man who raised horses and cattle and was understood equestrian. You know what equestrian is?
Equestrian?
Yeah, it's the sport of horses jumping over hurdles and horseback riding, and it's like athletic horse.
Yeah, I know it. Okay. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So if you look at some of the speed and agility hurdles that you see in the United States for football, soccer, stuff like that, a lot of that came from equestrian by Marv Marinovich, by the way. That's just a little fun
fact. Horses.
From horses. Yeah.
Fascinating, man.
Interesting, yeah. So, so this man, Marv Marinovich, was a very highly competitive athlete, mostly wrestling, boxing, and football. He was just a legendary competitor, and he took it seriously when a lot of people didn't take it seriously. Back when there was back during like the Vietnam War during the 1960s. So he played football in college and went to USC. He got drafted in the NFL and the AFL. There was 2 professional sports leagues at the time because they didn't have a lot of money for just one league. They had to compete. They had leagues compete against each other to help drive in money for the industry.
And the Super Bowl happened, and the whole world was watching. I mean, this has evolved so fast. It's my God, man.
It's evolved. That's part of the reason why this information got lost, because sports went into overdrive for 30 years.
Fascinating.
So he got into the NFL and the AFL. He was kind of struggling because he was going against guys who were already seasoned professionals, and he is a newbie out of college. So him being such a competitor, he's like, I gotta compete. I gotta get stronger. I gotta get faster. What do? They said, you have to go to the weight room, because that's what all the other guys are doing. Mm-hmm. We're lifting weights, we're deadlifting, we're doing all this stuff. Mm-hmm. And his own competitive nature worked against him, where he was competing in the weight room and on the field at such a rate where the heavy weight training that he was putting on, he was trying to squat thousands of pounds, deadlifting hundreds of pounds, bench pressing hundreds of pounds. He essentially destroyed his ability of athletics to make his muscles bigger, thinking that was going to help. And that resulted in only his whole NFL career, he walked away with only 1 play ever on the field.
Oh my.
So that was a very hard L for him to take. That was very hard. And he made it a goal for him to right his wrongs, to help the next generation of football players so they don't fall into the same issues that he did. And he had to innately feel within his own body what caused this. So he had to be very honest with himself and set aside his ego. So Marv Marinovich sought out information from
And
Eastern
what's his
Bloc
name? What's his name again? Just up.
Marv Marinovich.
Marinovich. Yeah, gotta check this out.
Yeah, Marinovich.
Yeah.
Passed away in 2020. R.I.P. Marv. So he sought out the help from Dr. Yessis, other people who are familiar with Eastern Bloc training methods, and he also sought out information from Western Bloc training methods, because this is when physical therapy and aerobics was first starting to evolve. Because there was money in physical therapy; it's a licensed practitioner. You know, it's not like being a trainer where it's an unlicensed practitioner. We're certified. We're not licensed. So we don't get state money. Yeah, we got to sell.
Big point. Yeah, most definitely. Yeah. Oh man, and that's one of the man. You're connecting so many dots for me, man. That's one of the reasons why, and that's no knock on therapists. No knock. No. Please don't misunderstand me what I'm saying right now. But that's the big difference where I see I have to bring in the money. Yeah. I have to improve my expertise because I have no safety net. Nobody's paying me. I got to pay myself. So right. I'm so with this incentive, I'm so driven to go down that rabbit hole of understanding the kettlebell. That's why we have people here saying, listen, I was spending years with a physiotherapist and I never got the same results that I got with you here. Because, and like I said, no knock, but it's just two different races, right? The licensed guy versus the certified guy. Big point. Yeah. Yeah.
That's yeah, no, we should have a lot of different episodes. We could really start to, we'll become immortal by the end.
Go down the rabbit hole, man. Let me tell you, that's crazy. I really enjoy this. Yeah.
So Marv Marinovich, and he also got a great gig because he had connections in the NFL, where he was able to be a scout for the Oakland Raiders NFL team. And so instead of a Soviet Union system saying like, hey, take everything we need, take all these resources and make it happen, his vehicle for the same situation, the NFL funded for him. That's where the money came from. The money came from the NFL. So they hired him. You go to every college and you figure out who the best guys are so we can draft them for our team. So he came up with a very specific methodology that he kind of extrapolated from his understanding of training horses and bulls, because the nervous system's a nervous system. We're all animals at the end of the day. The things he learned from Dr. Yessis, the things he understood about himself, and he was able to go through body after body after body after body that was funded by professional entertainment, not by the state, to collect data on what makes the best athletes. And through this process, he started to realize that there were similar patterns amongst human physiology, like what's going on with their feet, how they jump, how they move, what's going on with their spine, their hips, what are they scoring on flexibility, what are they scoring on this. He basically created the known methodology that all professional sports use to this day during the 1960s, and it was all funded by the Oakland Raiders. There's where the money came from. He didn't need a university. He had professional athletics, and he's like, I'm just going to do my own research, come up with my own things. And he was really Sigma about this. He didn't need a system. He was cool with his own system. And then that's where that's where he realized that the ones who had the best numbers in the weight room, they had the most injuries and they had the lowest numbers on the field. And he started to connect some dots where he was wondering, he's like, I don't understand. These guys are big and strong. Why are they getting slower? And then he started to really extrapolate the research from the Soviet Union and realize the value of having stronger, more pliable tendons, that bigger muscles doesn't always mean faster. There's a point of diminishing return where it can mean slower, that there's an equilibrium balance between muscles, between agonist and antagonist muscles. And if one gets bigger than the other or stronger or different, that can break down how the joint can stabilize, leading to more injuries. All these ideas he's developed that we all are using right now in all fields: chiropractic, physical therapy, sports performance training, fitness classes, etc. So through this process, he developed nervous system training. And then he was the first strength and conditioning coach for the NFL. He might have been the first professional strength and conditioning coach in the United States. He developed all these different, anytime you see like cone drills, the
Mm-hmm.
shuttle run,
Mm-hmm.
agility ladders, that was all him. He created all these ideas. It was all one guy. It was incredible. What he pulled off was absolutely incredible. But he had a similar situation that Dr. Yuri Forshahansky had. He found right spot, right funding, right amount of bodies, and he was able to evolve those scientific trainings even further. Now, information was not shared between the two nations. What happened in Russia stayed in Russia. The United States was kind of the same way. They didn't really want to share any things with the Ruskies, with the commies. They were very anti-Soviet. So, so they never, those two different ideologies never really met when he was developing his method, borrowing ideas, but they never met Marv Marinovich. So there's a lot of ideas Marv created that the Soviet Union didn't create. And that's where we land right now with nervous system training. This is a continuation of that scientific evidence. And it's evolved further. So now we got to go into Marv Marinovich has a son. He has a successful career strength and conditioning coach for the NFL. He has a son, Todd Marinovich. He decides to create the craziest experiment ever done. And honestly, everything is owed to the Marinovich family and to Todd for essentially being the guinea pig of modern day sports performance. A lot of these methods were refined, reworked, and perfected because Marv Marinovich decided, what if you take an athlete and put him in the perfect training environment from birth? Can you create the perfect athlete?
Wow.
And there's a whole documentary that dives into this called The Marinovich Project. It's a 30 for 30 documentary on ESPN. Great documentary. It's very, very interesting. And from a young age, Marv Marinovich made it his life's work to turn his son, Todd Marinovich, into the perfect football player, to the perfect athlete. And he used him as a means to collect data, to refine how to train athletes with the most correct methodology that yields the best results for sports. And that's where we arrive with nervous system training.
So my first question would be, and since we have now, after, 1 hour and 20 minutes, we have arrived on the idea of nerve muscle training. But it's so important, especially to connect the dots, man. This is so fascinating. So my first question would be, for the remaining time that we have, if we dive into this idea, does it exist, the perfect training methodology?
So here's the thing. I've asked myself this question for years, and I've fallen victim to being to doubling down in my own area. But where I've arrived as of late, there is no perfect training system because there is no perfect body. We all have flaws. We're all imperfect. We all have limitations, and sometimes things just go wrong. Sometimes things break, sometimes things tear, sometimes the mind doesn't want to do it anymore. There is no perfect, but there is something that yields the best odds to help you. All things work. Training is training. Stimulus is stimulus. Physics is physics. But some things will yield a better result than others. That's how I kind of look at it now. That's where I'm at, because I also want to keep my mind open to new breakthroughs. It's not over. It hasn't finished here. We just gotten started, in my opinion.
That's a good point. I mean, we hear this a lot because the nature of fitness training and whatever have you has this monetary incentive for the person who comes up with this new idea to make money, right? So that's why I take everything with a grain of salt, because it's always that's the new breakthrough idea. And I'm always a little bit I'm listening, but do you have any evidence? And I like how Dan John puts it. And even you see it from Dr. Yuri Verkhoshansky as well. If you have this new breakthrough idea, it should be tested in track and field or in the area of professional sports. And if it dominates, it is worth the money or it's worth your time. If it doesn't, it's just a fluke or whatever have you. But do you think we're still on the cusp of finding new ideas to train, new ideas to move? Because I believe we have to a certain extent, two categories. One that says, listen, I've seen it all. I've been in the game for 50 years. It doesn't exist. There's nothing new. And then you have the other side that is open-minded and says, hey, we don't know.
Yeah, well, in order for things to get better, you have to be ready to evolve it. Like, because to say that we've reached like this place of human perfection, now we start going back to the communists. Now we start diving back into ideology. You know, we start fantasizing and dreaming and becoming self-fulfilled prophecies. Really, at the end of the day, even if like nothing ever just finishes. It's like life. It's never just finished. Even us, we're evolving with each generation. You know, like in different ways, in different forms of thinking. Like language wasn't always a thing for human beings. There was a time where we were all body language based and using eyesight and just touching each other. But then language kind of pushed it for, who knows where this is going to go. So I never think it's finished. There's, you know, because then that goes against our hardwiring as human beings. We're never finished. We're always trying to evolve. We're always trying to extrapolate, make things better for the overall human race. You know, with technology, internet, flashlights, cameras, you know, everything can slightly be improved until we eventually become machines ourselves. But that's another story.
Exactly. So if I want to just point back a little bit to the idea of nerve system training, based upon my, I don't want, it's not a phrase. I just want to put out this remark and then get your opinion and your remarks on it. So after reading Dr. Yuri Verkhoshansky's work, after reading Dr. Yessis's work, and I've also read Louis Simmons's work, The Conjugate Method, which, by the way, no offense to Louis Simmons, rest in peace, but it was a hard read. It's not a book that I recommend because it's like he's talking to you. It's not.
Louis, interesting guy.
Yeah, Louis is awesome. I watched the podcast, which was more informative than his book about the conjugate method. The book was not so good, but you know, set that aside. But based upon the information that I now gather, or I have gathered, which is highly limited, just to put this out there, people ask me. So just recently, somebody asked me, "Hey, what will be the perfect kettlebell workout for a thrower?" And I used to say stuff like, you know, press and, you know, get your relative strength up and blah, 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 and improve your skills, blah. Now I say I would do three things. I would have a biomechanist check out your skill in throwing and find out where your limitations are.
Exactly.
Then I would do some sport-specific exercises that mimic this motion where all the muscles are involved. And that's what I would do. And of course, get your GPP up and not mention a word about the kettlebell. I just realized that this is so much bigger. It's not just an exercise or a training a press or whatever. It's not an exercise. It's that. And that's what was a great revelation with Dr. Michael Yessis. He says, don't think in exercises, think in movement patterns. So then things change drastically. So what's your take if people ask you like, hey coach, what do I need? I'm a thrower, I'm an MMA fighter or whatever have you, what do I have to do? So what do you stand on this?
Very simply, and we have human beings are really good at making things complicated. Let's make it simple. The human body, or let's say life is designed to adapt towards whatever goals you put it up against. So what's the goal? It's not like what makes you feel good or what's the goal? Do you need to run fast? Like let's say MMA. Okay, so you got 3 5-minute rounds that you fight for. So you need 5 minutes of what kind of endurance? There's aerobic endurance, anaerobic endurance, there's footwork, there's punches, there's grappling. Okay, so we got to figure out how we could duplicate those challenges that that's going to occur in your sport and overtrain it so you'll adapt. Let's say it's hockey. You need certain muscle groups. You need different movement patterns. Okay, what are the movement patterns? What do you have to do with your stick? You know, okay, you need to move the puck around a lot, you know, really fast over and over again. What muscles require that to work? Well, it's a lot of grip strength, dexterity of the wrist, a lot of core movement. Okay, let's take these very specific movements and find a way to overstress them. And your body will adapt towards whatever you need it to. Like, the human body is very adaptable. That's one thing that let us outcompete all these other animals, is our ability to adapt and change and evolve. Like, we swim, we can sprint, we can jump, we can skate on ice, we can fly airplanes, we can move at 65 miles per hour in vehicles, and our brains can keep up with that speed. We're highly adaptive animals. We can see in color. Like, how about that? Like, there's all these different things that are assets for our ability to adapt. So I would say, what's your goal? And try to duplicate the movements that you're going to require in your sport, and figure out how to overstimulate those movements.
See, and at this junction, Quintin, I think you've said this, we human beings have a tendency to make things complicated, and we have to make it simple, which I highly agree. Yet in my conversation with Dr. Yessis, I was so confused, because I was like, okay, I used to think it was simple. Hey, do your drills and become stronger. That's it. But it is a bit more complicated than that, right? So that's where I'm trying to go. Yes, I want to make it simple, but for somebody who used to think that get your deadlift, press, and squat and swing up, and you'll be a killer on the hockey in your hockey game as long as you work on your skills. No, it's actually not. Yeah. It's more sophisticated would be the proper term, probably.
You can get, so think of this, you can get some development. Do you play video games?
Yeah.
Okay, so have you ever played Skyrim?
No, I didn't like it.
Oh, okay. Okay, so let's say we have a video game. We'll create like a frame of an analogy.
Yeah.
So you can do said types of training methods, say heavy weightlifting, kettlebells, etc. If you're an athlete, you will get some benefits. Your endurance might go up a little bit. Your ability to understand movement patterns might increase. Your kinetic awareness. Your overall fitness, like your cardio, might get some slight bump ups. And people will say, hey, I got a little better. You know, that's why I like to do it. It does add some value. And there's some ways you can do it where you get huge increases, where you get huge increases in hand-eye coordination. You can shoot higher velocities much faster. Like, everything does help in a sense, but some things just help better than others, and some things just help incredibly well. So you got to kind of look at it like this, and that's why people get so confused on, is this right? Is that right? Is this? It all can help. It all can work to a point. But let's say if you want to get better at hockey, and just as an example, and so you decide to subscribe strictly to just kettlebell swings, that will give you some benefits, but eventually you'll start to adapt to kettlebell swings more than your hockey. And then you'll hit a point of diminishing returns where now the training method is taking away from what you need, because your muscles and your nervous system is trying to adapt to this new form of stimulus, this new goal. And some people get lost in the sauce of training more than trying to stick to their sport. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. So it's important for us to that's why when you read through Dr. Michael Yessis' book, he lays out the plan how they would develop the athlete over 1 year. It is blocks. So we do this, then we do this, then we do this, then we do this, and we're never supposed to confuse two blocks with each other. So there's there's the attention to detail is so fascinating that it's like, wow. And he said this too. He rephrased what you said right now in a different way. He said, yes, you get some adaptation. And that's, I love this discussion. He said, but it's all luck. You don't know. Maybe you improve a little bit, but maybe it doesn't improve your game.
Right.
So I told him, I was like, yeah, but how am I going to improve the game? He said, yeah, have a biomechanist, look at you, test it, and then do specific exercises to improve, like what you said, with the hockey player. And now I have finally come to the point where I understand, okay, that's why it's important to differentiate GPP and SPP, right? You have the general physical preparation, bring your endurance up, bring your relative strength up. And then you have the specific physical preparation where you have to dive deep into your sport and understand practical exercises that fit into your sport.
And it goes another layer deeper than that. With Marv figured out that it could be very specific muscle groups that you're genetically weaker in that might need to get fixed, which will add just another piece that you might be missing in your skating, your sprinting, maybe you got weaknesses in your feet. Your toes don't grab through your shoes very well. Maybe your arches or your big toe is not very strong, which stimulates your glute to activate. And so we'll fix this one thing, and all of a sudden now that adds another physical ability, a talent, a gift, if you will. So this goes even further. Marv Marinovich has this down to a very specific athletic assessment where we test everything down to the toe, to your neck, to your spine, and figure out where these weaknesses in your genetic chain may be, that you might not even know exist because you never had to test them.
And that's what Dr. Michael Yessis says as well. He says, I told him, but isn't it, I've always been told, don't fix what it's not broken. So you have the athlete who's good at it. Just let him keep doing his drills. He's good at it. Just keep doing what he does. A runner has to run. So he said, yes, but he still might have some flaws in his technique. And he points back to a study or to an article where he said a huge number, 95% or 100% of the athletes don't have perfect technique, even at the highest level. Even those honored master of sport guys from the Soviets don't have perfected techniques. When you look at the lens of the biomechanist, that's why you have mathematicians and scientists all come together and they evaluate you and say, listen, you still have some, there's still something lacking. And this is where I see it gets complicated because of the nature of it. Man, what? I got to check my toes? Really? Yeah. But yeah.
Well, the human body is insanely complicated. It is the human body is the most studied subject in the human race. And we still can't bring my hair back. Like this is how difficult this is.
Yeah.
Like people don't realize how hard this is. The human body is so complex. It is literally the most rarest occurrence in the cosmos is sentient life. Not even sentient life. How about just life in general?
Life in general, yeah.
Like it is such a rare occurrence. So that must make it highly complex.
And still we are asking, or we are demanding easy answers to a highly complex topic. Right? Exactly. That's it.
And now you're seeing how we absorb information, perceive, and express that information back as culture. And this is why we landed right here. This is where we landed. Information got lost. People don't quite understand because it's insanely complex. Ideological factors, political factors, human egos, like all of these things kind of like create these barriers and obstacles for us to just get to one simple truth on what works best. Yeah. And that's honestly, that's the story of the human race. It's been that way since the monkeys. It's been that way since the monkey said, I'm not using fire. And he's like, I'm going to use fire. Guess what? The ones who pick fire lived.
Yeah.
It just is what it is. And this is just our journey. It's not right or wrong, or it's just a part of our journey that we're all going to kind of take, and I feel like if we keep pushing towards these directions, and it's good that we're getting upset. Honestly, it's good we're getting upset over this because we could get upset over far worse things. Like ideologies and human nature can become very dangerous, and we're seeing that.
We're seeing repercussions of this. Yeah. We're seeing it today. Yeah. In so many areas of life. Yeah.
So to me, I will take negative comments over the alternative of where disagreements can go, because at least we're debating on something positive.
Man,
you know, see, at least we're all in team people,
yeah.
team helping people. You know,
Yeah.
we're not in team war or team. I personally think when we veer away from such discussions and challenging ourselves in such ways and hurting our own feelings, it goes the other way.
Yeah,
we descend into hell,
and we go into this echo chamber where we think it is true because everybody around us says it's true.
Man, it becomes dangerous.
Man, it's all entangled. And wow, it's just what you're mentioning, your last phrase right there. I just started the video, or I finished it before we got started, and I'm doing a video right now on the top 10 kettlebell coaches you need to follow, right? So as I was going through the list, because I've had conversations with so many awesome kettlebell folks, the final point, it just dawned on me right before I was doing the video. I was like, I got to thank the community, the folks who are commenting, because even though there are vile sometimes and highly negative comments, sometimes I find a nugget of truth in it.
Yeah.
Then I go down on this rabbit hole doing some research where I find, oh, wow, interesting. So I'm taking this by heart, and I view negative or critical feedback as, hey, my thinking and my philosophy gets tested. Awesome. Let's see if it holds up.
Yeah.
And if it doesn't, I have to adjust. It's that simple. I think that's what science does, right? Hey, we have this thing. Let's see if we can reproduce it. Oh, it didn't work. Well, okay. We got a new piece of information.
There's a phrase that a physical therapist, it was another strength coach told me that really helped me psychologically. He said, we're all trying our best until we know better.
Oh, that's a good one.
We're just trying our best, you know, because I've definitely worked with kids that wanted to get better at track and made them do kettlebells, and they did get a little bit better, but that might have not been the best way to do it. Mm-hmm. But they did get better. You know, we're trying to help. We're trying to do something positive. Mm-hmm. We're not like, we're not arresting people in the middle of the night like the KGB. Like, we're doing better. You know, we're trying our best. We're trying to figure this out. And I always go back, like, fitness professionals, coaches, if you're watching this is about the people we serve. This is about how we can help them. It's not about and sometimes we might be wrong. And you know what? I've been wrong, and I've tried methods that didn't produce great results. And I've admitted to the athletes, this is my mistake. You know, this is not the direction we should have taken things. We overdid certain exercises, and now we got to kind of get your knee back together. And, you know, usually they say it's fine. Like, we're trying, like, we're out here, we're trying. Like, because people really want the support, you know, as much as results help, if people subscribe to results, we wouldn't be here talking about it. People at the end of the day want to feel supported. They want to feel helped, and they want to feel connected with other human beings towards a common goal. That is really where our power comes from. You know, the results are a big factor, but for trainers, if this is challenging for you, if this goes against how you make your money and you feel like you're wrong or you don't want to sit, I promise you, the people you work with and the people you serve, if you really are looking out for their best interests, they will not let that be a factor to keep working with you, because at the end of the day, they know you're on their team. They know you're helping them. You're trying to help them. And it's so hard just to get someone to help us these days. Yeah,
man. Man, this one phrase comes to my mind that I've heard so many times. People don't care how much you know until they know how much you care.
Yeah, bam.
And I think that hits the nail on the head, where I love what you're saying. It's like, listen, I was wrong, guys. We tried this. And what I tell our clients in here, and I think that's the reason why we get results with people who have, for example, the client who was just here when we were having this podcast, she came in with a herniated back, right, a couple of months ago. And she was so scared to lift weights and so scared to you know, even do a swing or whatever. It was out of her mind. And I was like, let's give it a shot. Let's build up some basic structural integrity first with some easy exercises, give you some basic strength, and then we then try some swings and stuff because it's good for the midsection. So right now we have arrived at a point where she's like, wow, if my husband would see the weight I was lifting, he'd be like, are you crazy with your back? And I'm like, yeah, you now lift it properly. So you're able to do it. And that's just a small example. So it goes to show that what I say so many times, and where I think sometimes coaches are scared, I tell our clients, and I got this from Verkhoshansky's book. He said, the greatest coaches always experiment. Hey, let's try it out. I have a hunch. Let's give it a shot, see where it leads to. And if we feel, oh, it doesn't work, hey, let's dial it back and try something else. It's not my idea is right. And if we are wrong, then, no, take it. And I love what you're saying. It's servitude. We are servants. The coach is serving his people or her people. That's the idea, man.
Yeah.
Wow. Man, hey, Quintin, listen, man, we got to do this again. I think we just touched, it's the tip of the iceberg.
Yeah. This is the cliffhanger. We should make a series out of this.
Yeah. Oh man.
Because now we haven't even gotten into what nervous system training is, the athletes who have subscribed to it.
Yeah.
People like Troy Polamalu, world famous football player, people like George St. Pierre, best MMA fighter of all time, Dominic Cruz, arguably one of the best bantamweights of all time. Like the list goes on and on. Manny Pacquiao, Miguel Cotto, some of the best athletes in the world have had access to this training. But if you're just your everyday person, you have no idea it's out there.
Yeah.
There is secret sauce. There are mind-blowing training methods that we haven't even talked about the training yet.
Yeah, no.
Like this is,
no.
So this
I mean,
is
just judging. I mean, this is your life's work. Just judging on the stuff that I read in Yessis' book, I was like, what were these guys doing? What? And I just incorporated, on a small side note, I just incorporated death jumps in my training regime. And just some basic stuff, right? From the box down, boom, and jumping high as far up as I can and as quick as I can to get this explosive activation, which I think Yessis has said it's 1.2 seconds or something. Then it's explosive, right? So I've just incorporated. Again?
0.15 seconds.
0.15. See? Yeah, you man. I talked to the right person right here. Awesome. So I just incorporated this. So my mind is like, I jump down the box and I immediately think about, I want to go up as fast as I can as soon as my feet touch the ground. So I've incorporated just a fraction of this idea. And just recently I was able to jerk 2 double 32s, 64 kg kettlebells.
You got improvements.
I got him. And I feel it in my explosiveness from my hips as I bring the kettlebells up. I'm like, wow. And yeah, I mean, the next time we're going to take a deep dive into the training strategies.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, this is what I want you to do. If you get a chance, if you have the extra time, I want you to look up a trainer, my mentor, who worked with Marv Marinovich. His name is Nick Curson. And he runs a company, a strength and conditioning company in California called Speed of Sport. And he has
Speed of Sport, yeah, Speed of Sport, right?
Yeah, Speed of Sport. You just go to speedofsport.com. He is a phenomenal coach. I owe a lot to him. He's the one that taught me the system. Without him, I wouldn't be here today with the career that I have. He really did me a solid. He has a series of DVDs or downloadable videos, ATP 1, ATP 2, ATP 3. If you ever want to get deeper into this training, maybe do something in between until we have another episode, I recommend buy ATP 1, get a stability ball, buy a set of hand weights, maybe invest $200. Change your life and follow the workouts. That will, whoops. Oh, did I lose the feed? That will change everything for you. Because then you'll realize how much the central nervous system, when you train it properly and work on these biomechanical areas that Dr. Yessis is talking about, how quickly your strength improves.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah.
We'll check it out. Most definitely we'll check it out to see if I actually do it, but I will check it out and do some research.
Yeah, at least check it out.
Yeah,
look at
that's
it.
what I'm gonna do. Yeah.
I'll send you some videos and stuff. I'll send you a lot of source material, and check out my Instagram and my social media. I put up training videos. It's FMAsportstraining.com or FMA Sports on IG. You know, watch my content. I'm always putting new videos out of all the kids that I'm training, and you'll kind of get a peek into what we're doing and what we're doing and our training methods and the equipment we use.
Awesome. So just as a final note, and then we got to run.
Sure.
What helped you really? I mean, you mentioned the red pill. So this insinuates that we have that we come into this philosophy or I got to frame it right, that we discover these philosophies from the Soviet Union, and it blows our minds at first. It's like, this can't be. And I mean, we now have done some work to share the reasons of why it's not so popular, or at least not with the label "this comes from the Soviet Union" on it. So what helped you to engage into this material? Did you put your ego aside? That was the main thing, or what was the main driving factor for you?
I needed to win. I needed to win my fights. I got knocked out in front of my dad. Felt horrible, you know, especially as a man. You don't want to lose in front of your father. That was a big deal for me. And I was an MMA fighter. I've already come from a culture that's been criticized, scrutinized, not accepted. Like all through the 90s, no one accepted jiu-jitsu. Everyone thought MMA was just for losers and savages and barbarians. And now it's one of the highest sports in the world. I've already come from a place where, like, my dad taught me jiu-jitsu when I was young. He learned it from the Gracies in California in the 80s when they were doing seminars in college, before UFC, before everything. And my dad's like, this shit works. And he taught me jiu-jitsu at a young age. And so everyone was into boxing, but my dad already taught me that there are things you can learn that not everyone else quite understands yet. So I really owe it to my father's teachings to keep my mind open to new things. And if it feels right for me, and if it produces the correct results, just because higher systems don't quite understand it, that doesn't really mean anything. Like I said, systems are artificial in our heads. It doesn't discard what's happening in reality. So when you have a 130-pound Brazilian coming into a cage who strangles a giant bodybuilder with his legs, everyone's like, What? This is impossible. How is this happening?
Yeah.
You know, and so to me, I realized that, things can happen that you just don't quite know how. That doesn't mean it's not happening, though. You just don't understand how it happened or why it's happening. So that was like the seed that got planted in me. So when I first saw this training, when BJ Penn was doing this training method, getting ready for a UFC fight, Marv Marinovich was training BJ Penn. They did a small documentary on his training. And then I already had it in my mind to stay open to new ideas, stay open to new fighting styles, new techniques, different ways to throw your punches, all these different ideas that MMA kind of taught me because it yielded success. I kind of took it and kind of created a way of life that way. And that's what kind of opened my mind to the different training methods and my philosophy that I live by today.
Fascinating. So, and it teaches me that I have to be on the lookout, that if I don't understand something, my immediate reaction, I feel it. I feel how the emotion or the feeling comes up. It's like, that's stupid. But I have to push this emotion down and say, listen, let's just evaluate it first. See what the facts say, the evidence says, see if that's something new that can help us, and then move forward. Maybe sometimes we have to discredit it or be like Bruce Lee, right? Take what's good, leave what is bad. But man, Quintin, I really appreciate it, man. This such a, man, it's the first podcast of, this is so awesome. The first podcast of this year, and it's a red pill, which I tastefully swallowed. I really enjoyed it, man. And we got to make this a series, man, because
Absolutely.
I'm so interested in learning more about this, even though I don't use it in my everyday work as a coach. You know, we have a different segment of clients, but it's such a highly fascinating field. And yeah, we got to do this again. So we'll stay connected. Yeah, we stay connected.
I was a kettlebell instructor before I learned this.
Awesome, man. So
yeah, so you never know. You never know what it could work. Where things can go.
It's so awesome. It's so awesome. You know, and the kettlebell world is such an, I think the reason why we are where we are today now is because I'm open-minded to everything. I don't subscribe to one idea or the other idea. I do understand the limitations of all these ideas. And I'm really the Bruce Lee, the Jeet Kune Do approach. Like, hey man, that's good. I don't like this, or that doesn't work. Maybe this works for somebody else. Totally fine. But I'm just combining these ideas. And I think that's, just you are confirming that this is the proper way to do it, right? Listen to the experts and then leave your feelings aside and then combine what is worth. And
it's more fun this way.
Yeah.
It's more fun this way. Like, cause like you're going to get bored of what you do.
Yeah.
You know, like to keep it totally honest. And kettlebells might be the most fun for way to use. Like kettlebells are a lot of fun. They're very dynamic. You can get very creative with it. It's almost like an art. It's like dancing. Like you can put a lot of emotional content in kettlebell work. Like that's why I still do some kettlebells, you know, because it is fun to do. But it is also a lot of fun just to look at new ideas. Maybe you can take things and combine them and create something new. And understand
understand the limitations. I think that's what we coaches, especially the niche coaches, right? The niche coaches, where we are, I think, and that's a good thing, specified in one area. I think I'm specified a little bit into kettlebells, but I stay open and I know its limitations. I don't walk around saying it's the end all be all. It does a lot, but we need more. You need most definitely more when it comes to athletics.
Yeah.
So, and I understand it. That doesn't make the kettlebell bad, but hey man, I got to run now.
I got you. No, I got you.
Such a fascinating conversation. We'll stay connected, Quintin. And the next time we meet and we have a conversation, we're going to go into details of the training philosophy and your stuff. And you have to do a lot of unpacking then.
Yeah.
Awesome.
All right. I really enjoyed this podcast, man. Thank you for having me on.
Awesome.
Really appreciate it. And yeah, we'll stay in touch. We'll do this again, and we'll just keep trying to get information to help more people, you know?
So here's the next step that you have to do. Like the video, consider subscribing, share it with a friend who's also interested in kettlebells, and then go watch this playlist where you have all the powerful conversations that I have had with the greatest minds in the kettlebell world. If you enjoyed this podcast, you're going to enjoy these other ones as well. So go click on it and watch it right now.